welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie, and I'll be your astrologer today. Thanks for joining me, and to those of you guys who celebrate, happy 4th of July. Here in the United States, we are celebrating our Independence Day today, and I thought, what better way to celebrate than talk about some of the major points that I see for July of 2024 and why I'm seeing fireworks in a very big way. If you guys like my content, you want to see more of it, click the bell button below, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up if you like this content, and leave me a comment. I'd love to hear your guys' feedback. I decided to put this together, well, primarily I pretty much do this video almost every year. I've done this the last couple of years, but I thought it would be a good time to do it now for a number of reasons. But as you guys may or may not know, I actually recently put together a webinar on the 2024 presidential election. Put a lot of work into it. It is beyond probably what most people are looking at. It is about 4 hours long, and I take a look at all major potential candidates. We have President Biden, we have Donald Trump, as well as RFK Jr. I go through the solar return for the United States, as well as the progressions and major transits of election and inauguration day. I also compare these potential candidates to the United States chart to see who would be best for the future of the country, discuss many things like this upcoming trial that we're going to be having for Donald Trump, looking at whether or not he'd be going to jail. We also talk about the dates that I think that Biden may potentially be stepping down. I filmed this actually the day of the debate. It was like hours before I filmed this, and I wanted to really do it just to push myself, just to see if I could get it done. And I wanted a completely unbiased perspective prior to any of these events taking place. Anyway, while I was doing that video, I was like, there's a lot of really good stuff in here. I think there's some things that I would like to just share with my general audience. So I put this video together for you guys, and I just want to let you guys know, if you want more in depth, if you are interested or the slightest bit curious about what might happen in November of 2024, what other potential candidates may run. I discuss everyone from Michelle Obama to Gavin Newsom. We talk about Hillary Clinton. We also discuss who may potentially be looking for a spot in the Republican ticket as well. So it's a really interesting video. It goes all the way really into topics of the United States next year, as we are getting ready to come into our Uranus return, as well as Saturn and Neptune crossing into the Placidus 4th house. So I have this on sale for this next week, for the 4th of July. You guys can get this entire 4-hour presentation for $17.76. It's on sale for you guys this week. So definitely check that out. All right. So for those of you guys who are going to get like a sample of what that video is like, I really just wanted to say, hey, it's America's birthday. Let's take a look at the solar return. I'll give you guys some of my hot takes on that, and just kind of the themes overall for the next year. But I can see several things. There's about 3 or 4 things that are happening actually in the month of July, which is just creating fireworks in a very, very big way in the United States chart. So we're going to talk 2024 into 2025. Obviously, the country is a hot topic right now. The future of the United States is a huge topic, and rightfully so, because I feel like we're in like unprecedented times. We are approaching our November presidential election. Our president is sitting in the middle of just drama over whether or not he's going to continue to run for the Democratic nominee, after his recent debate that he had against previous President Donald Trump. As a nation, we're facing uncertainty as to not only whether or not he will run, but who is in charge in the meantime, and what has been going on over the last couple of years, now that we can kind of fully see that he's clearly struggling with perhaps what some people are saying are early signs of dementia. Now, our previous president, Donald Trump, is also in the midst of drama. He's facing a sentencing this month for felony charges that likens him to like some kind of like mobster or gangster. I think I've gone back and forth in this, but I think somebody said that he's had just as many, if not more, convictions than Al Capone. which is crazy. So we're facing multiple constitutional crises, everything from issues with free speech, fair elections, and to the rule of law. Our country is sick, both physically as well as emotionally, due to the lack of support, education, quality healthcare, and increasing rising costs of medications, as well as cost of living. We're seeing also that happening with the large numbers of people who are struggling with homelessness, addiction. We are seeing military veterans that are literally being stranded and not really being well taken care of. We are spiraling further into national debt. Our national debt is now topping out at nearly $33 million and trillion dollars, $33 trillion. And our interest payments are about to exceed our defense spending as a country. Wow. We've got reckless money spending resulting in record high inflation. We're kind of blindly sleepwalking into further fueled proxy wars with Ukraine, now facing escalating tension with Russia's nuclear forces. Recently, there's been more sanctions against Russia and secondary sanctions to relationships with those who deal with Russia, only assisting in China and Russia becoming closer allies. The BRICS nations continue to push forward to devalue and debase the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Am I missing anything? I don't know. If I'm missing anything, let me know. But I think that's a pretty up-to-date kind of synopsis of where we are now in July of 2024. What is the future of the United States? I've got reason to believe that July is going to be fireworks. I spy 3 things with my eye that I'm going to be touching on today that I think is really, really important and worth noting. So let me pull up the United States chart so you guys can see it. All right. So we've got the U.S. chart. All right. So then we will pull up the transits. Doing this a couple days early. All right, so basically the transits today, you're going to see the moon. The moon's in Gemini. That's where the solar return moon is going to be as well. But the United States, obviously, Sag rising chart, sun in Cancer, and the moon is in Aquarius. So we have this brewing Mars-Uranus conjunction that's going to be happening here pretty soon. That's going to be taking place in mid-July. So I want to kind of touch on that a little bit. So we're going to see Mars in Taurus come into the United States 6th house, okay? And Mars, obviously, I use Placidus. So for me, Mars is going to have connections to the home base. It's also going to have connections to younger people, youth, things involving children, maybe creativity, self-expression. And Mars has connections to Scorpio in the 12th house, which can be about hidden enemies, dealing with shadow issues, things that can be about self-undoing, things that kind of become unraveled. And obviously Scorpio does deal with trauma, tension. It can also deal with terror-related events. So we're going to see, as we're getting into mid-July, this conjunction between Mars and Uranus is going to be felt pretty strongly. I work with about a 2 or 3 degree orb, so anywhere from like the 12th to about the 20th is where we're going to be feeling the impact of this conjunction. Obviously, Mars deals with aggression, conflict, military. It deals with war. It can deal with injuries. It can deal with men. It can deal with things that can be heated, right? So Mars transits, when they come into conjunction with other planets, you want to watch not only what the other planet is, but you want to see the aspects, because the aspects of a conjunction is going to be a little bit more pronounced if you're seeing oppositions and squares during that particular transit. So when we look at the conjunction, it's going to be happening in the 6th house, okay? In the sign of Taurus. I've talked about how this Mars-Uranus conjunction is probably going to bring about increased inflation. We're also going to see probably higher food costs. We could see, some kind of conflict escalating. We can see issues over conflict over land, over property, banking meltdowns, issues pertaining to like land grabs. Uranus is anything connecting to revolution, freedom. It's about the internet. It's about, masses and groups of people. It is about revolution. So when you take these 2 planets together, it's kind of like a bomb going off. That's how I see Mars and Uranus in conjunction, even when it's not aspected. So something to kind of think about is that out in the skies, there is going to be this kind of violent revolutionary energy that is brewing, okay? In America's chart, it is coming into the 6th house and it's squaring off with the United States moon in Aquarius. So the moon represents the emotional body, right? If this is the chart of a country, then this is saying, where is everybody kind of at emotionally? How are we feeling? I've jokingly referred to that Aquarius moon in the 3rd house as like that whole, America, hold my beer type of mentality, kind of weird, wacky, freedom loving, very outspoken. That is pretty much that moon in a nutshell in the 3rd house. So we're seeing some kind of conflict that's brewing with the moon, and the moon rules the 8th house of it could be things relating to karmic debts. This could literally be about debt. This can be about deaths, changes and transformations psychologically that impacts us as Americans. Obviously, we have a ton of planets in Cancer. So this idea of home and family and security has been very much ingrained into us with all of those Cancer placements. And I think the square is going to really maybe kind of disrupt things emotionally a little bit, as if it has not already the current last couple of weeks. Now, going through the 6th house, something that I was looking at is I pulled up my rulership book, and I wanted to get more information about, what things could be happening in the 6th house, okay? So where the planets are is where we're going to see the action. If you guys don't have this book, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing book to have for reference if you're wanting to get more context to like what certain houses, signs, or planets can actually represent. So when I look at this, it's happening at 26 degrees, okay? So this is a degree that's associated with Taurus. So I think it's definitely going to have some connection to physical structures, to physical things like food, land, money, and banks. Now, specifically, the North Node is in Aries, so it's really important to watch what's going on with Mars this year, because I think that we're going to see some things that are kind of unexpected, because the North Node does talk about what we're developing and what we're moving into in the future. But it can also be things that are unknown or kind of questionable, futuristic, right? So Mars conjunct Uranus, and we've got the 6th house. So these are things that the 6th house has associations with. Armed forces and army, assimilation of food, connections to birds in general. This is also connected to chickens, okay? I'm just telling things that are kind of popping up for me that seem kind of specific to what's happening in the world. Let's see, climatic conditions affecting health, okay? Common people, common employments. This can also be contracts concerning property or real estate, cooks or cooking, court of law, okay, especially anything connected to jury or records of the court. What else? Debts and debtors, dependence, disease, okay, 6th house is about disease, drugs and drugstores, employees, enemies of, secret enemies, fire departments, food and food places where food is stored or prepared, domestic fowl, freedom, governesses, let's see, what else? Harvesting, health in general, illness, again, which we heard. Let's see, what else? Is there anything else I'm missing? Medical profession, military matters, all military men, professions including officers, military gear, and militarism. Milk and milkmen. Pharmacists, policemen, the police. Poultry, poultry raisers. Sanitation, servants, so public service, I could see, or servants. Am I missing anything else? Warships, workers, welfare work, welfare workers. All right, I think you guys get the gist of it. Okay, so this is where the action is going to be. So it can be revolving around these things. And I think it's money or food in connection or correlation to these things. So that's challenging the moon, which is going to bring up 8th house vibes, which is going to be emotions, feelings, talking about things that are scary, feeling overwhelmed. Now, what is the 3rd house rule? Things like accidents, written agreements, airway travel or transportation. This is also about automobiles. It's connected to broadcast or broadcasting, things like radio, television, things like that. All means of communication, both local and national. Neighboring countries, okay? So this could be talking about some kind of conflict with a neighboring country. That's something to consider. Something that's surrounding us. Court of law reporters, education, health, publicity, okay, journalists, obviously journalism, 3rd house, writing, writers, letters, literature, magazines, things revolving around lungs. Okay, remember Saturn's the dispositor of that moon, and it is relatively close to Neptune, so we could be hearing about some like lung issues, issues pertaining to health and that. Mailboxes, mail carriers, memory loss, memorizing, mental inclination. So are we going to hear more about issues with mail distribution? Messages, the nervous system, newspapers, let's see, anything else? Radios, railroads, railroad men, transport, railroad yards, okay, respiratory issues, restlessness, stock in general, storms, effects of storms, tape recorders, teachers, telegrams, thought, traffic, transportation, air travel, vehicles, voice, things that are connected to writers. Okay, so that's pretty much everything. So we're seeing tension between those two areas, right? So quite literally, Mars, Uranus in the 6th house, I think a real emphasis on issues with illness. Mars is illness. That's what it is connected to. It can be viruses, it can be fevers. I think about the squares to the moon, where people are getting tense revolving around things that they're hearing on the media about what you can eat, what you can't eat, what might be tainted, what they're testing, what animals are being infected. If 3rd house Mercury energy is more connected to birds, and 6th house is more about cleanliness and things revolving around health, and Taurus is food and things we consume, and it can also be about beef or cattle. I'm wondering if we're going to be hearing more about some of this scare in regards to some kind of illness that might be transferring between animals to humans or food that we may consume. So there's that. So that's going to be intense. We're going to see also lots of, I think, harsh criticism revolving around military mobilization, what's going on. There might be sudden, things going on where there could be intensity taking place within, like military stations, and where we may potentially have, places all over the world where there could be some conflict or some hostility. Recently, in some of our European stations that we have, American, like Army stations, I guess that's what you call them. They recently increased the threat level. There's several threat levels, but like for the first time in I think over 10 years, they said it's like a second to highest kind of threat level, which they consider to be an imminent threat to one of those potential foreign bases, which is kind of scary and interesting as we're seeing Mars and Uranus come into conjunction. So it can be literally talking about some threats revolving around some of those spaces and the impact that it might have on the military, and how that news, 3rd house, is kind of affecting people who are listening, or reading the news. Anyway, this particular conjunction, it's important because Uranus is the dispositor of the moon, and Venus is the dispositor of these two planets, and we're going to see about a day or two prior, Venus will oppose Pluto. So this is going to represent a power struggle that's going on. You guys heard me talk about it a little bit during the Mercury video how Mercury would face off with Pluto and how Leo is going to be about these younger, more charismatic potential people who are coming into potential leadership roles, or they're being seen as leaders, or they're being championed as leaders. Perhaps Venus opposed Pluto can talk about that there is a lot of resistance to a particular woman. I'm wondering, and this is not me politicking, if you're going to hear a lot of like really strong opinions about Vice President Kamala Harris, whether or not people are supportive of her because she is a woman who is in a position of power, and whether or not they're, feeling like she should be somebody who could be considered or not. I think this may also be more where we're hearing more about the wife, because Venus can be about the wife of President Biden. And right now we're seeing Jill Biden being totally painted to be a monster. We don't know what's really going on. Nobody knows. So I'm not going to speculate, but you're hearing a lot of people who are kind of outcrying, saying like, this is elder abuse, like she's, making him, stay in office. And we've heard recently Biden going to kind of Camp David and discussing with his family whether or not he's going to step down or if he's going to stay. And so maybe the Venus-Pluto opposition can be talking about, that a woman is being villainized and being seen as a villain that is trying to maintain and hold on to control, right? That opposition to Pluto. We may see some major financial scandal or something out in the world as well, or that there is something that's kind of brewing where people are finding out that there is some kind of financial crime or something that has happened. We can also see lots of people who are acting out of rage because of changes in relationships and personal possession and financial situations with Mars conjunct Uranus just on its own. This conjunction will be happening on top of a star called Algol, and Algol is around 26, 27 degrees of Taurus. It is the demon head star. So I want to read to you guys about that, because I think just having Uranus there in general, everybody kind of feels like things are topsy-turvy and we can just kind of like snap at any given moment. But Algol has probably one of the more gnarly, reputations when it comes to some of the kind of like original fixed stars. It's known as the demon's head. It's, in traditional astrology, they talk about bodies, piles of bodies that are seen everywhere connected to this particular star. Misfortune, violence, decapitation, hanging, electrocution, mob violence, dogged, violent nature, death, glamorous power of attraction, and great seductive beauty. Now, when you see planets in conjunction to this, you have to keep in mind a lot of this was kind of like Hellenistic. They weren't looking at anything really past Saturn, so it's not going to talk a lot about outer planets like Uranus. So you have to kind of put your modern spin on it. But Mars, they do talk about, and when Mars has conjunctions to this degree, there is some kind of connection or association that we do see that can happen out in the world in connection to murder or death, okay? Obviously, a lot of trigger words here, sorry guys, but we can see that. I find it interesting that this is going to happen when the moon is in Libra. I think you guys saw those videos I did last month where I was like, somebody's going to get assassinated. We're going to see something. And there was like 2 assassination attempts in 1 month when the moon hit that south node conjunction. I think it was like around 14, 15 degrees of Libra. There are connections to assassination and decapitation with Mars Uranus on this degree. And then I see the moon conjunct the south node as well. And so I think that there is a potential that we could see some particularly really extreme energy. Obviously, I don't hope for that. I don't condone violence. I don't want that. I am anti all of those things. But I call a spade when I see it, and I see a potential for something kind of happening that could make everybody literally kind of like explode and lose their head. They say that when this is on the MC, that there can be murder, sudden death, beheading, mischief, and unless it's with a positive planet like Jupiter, which can be about actually victory in wars, generally it's pretty negative. Well, when this conjunction happens, at least where I am, we are going to see the conjunction on the midheaven. So it's going to be here. Let's see, where is that? No, it's a little bit further. I take that back. So that's when it starts, but it's going to be at 26 and change. So this is going to be taking place on the 15th. And if you see this down to the minute, granted, this is where I am, but I went, oh, okay. So let's see if the astrology is correct. And what is happening around 9:30 a.m. Central Time, July 15th, 2024? What is happening? Well, that's going to give us a Leo rising, 28 degrees, same degree as Donald Trump's ascendant. The Mars-Uranus conjunction on his midheaven, right around the time that he's just having to come out of his court sentencing. He's going to have to be dealing with the Republican convention. Clearly, there's going to be fireworks with Mars and Uranus being on his midheaven. But that, to me, is kind of scary. What is happening that morning in the world? Venus is in the 12th house with the United States North Node. Could it be about a woman coming to power? Somebody else who's being put in position to potentially take over for Joseph Biden? Maybe. I don't know. I mean, I've speculated for a while, and I talk about it in my video, that I do think he will step down. And I said that before any of this started happening, because it's in his chart. But, you know, there's something about this that made me go, like, what the heck is happening? Now, the Sabian symbol for 27 degrees of Taurus is a squaw selling beads. And it can be interpreted several ways, but essentially, I think this is about the theme of commerce and trade, because the image of somebody selling beads is a focus on material exchange, and it could relate to our personal or professional life, where you may be involved in buying, selling, or trading goods or services. So the other way of looking at this is that there can be something that happens when this conjunction is taking place that is going to have a major impact on trade and exchange. Taurus is money, Uranus is digital innovations in the future, and Mars can be literally about there being attacks or things that can happen on banking systems and stuff that could potentially generate enough concern or fear to push people in the direction of accepting what may be some kind of digital currency, some kind of conversion, something like that, right? It's possible. I think this could also be about some really difficult numbers for jobs. I think it could be about layoffs. I think it could be about implications that are happening now from sanctions. We are now not only sanctioning Russia, but we're sanctioning countries that work and do business with Russia, which in turn can impact us. It could suddenly dramatically increase the cost of our goods if we piss off the wrong person. It could also potentially put us in a situation where, you know, we are seeing that where innovation and technology is actually cutting jobs, where we are seeing people are losing positions because they're being replaced, right, by digital kind of innovations. I'll leave it at that, but I definitely feel like that square to the moon is going to be particularly active, and I'm going to be watching and seeing what happens, and if there is going to be some cause or concern where we feel like something is under attack, and it could be our food systems, it could be potentially our medical systems. We have, over the last several months, had a number of 911 systems go down on a statewide level. This could also be extreme weather and other things that are impacting our ability to move around. Uranus is also things connected to the internet, things connected to energy. And when we see Mars conjunct Uranus, things overheat. So we could be seeing some issues relating to the grid, and where we're potentially having some kind of breakdowns, which can in turn actually impact communications with that square to the third house, right? All right, now something else I want to mention, which I think is interesting. There's two other things connected to this, so I'll keep it quick. If you guys probably watched the Astrology podcast, okay? Everybody on there is great. But recently I saw a post that had Austin from the Astrology podcast, and he was talking about how this particular Mars-Uranus conjunction is the exact same degree as Israel's Pluto. Okay, so Mars and Uranus is going to conjunct Israel's Pluto. Maybe I'll look at that in the future. I'm more concerned about America. No offense to other countries, but like we have big enough fish to fry here, so I don't want to get into like other politics. But certainly a Mars, Pluto, Uranus kind of combination could definitely be something pretty significant in regards to physical damage, financial conflict, something brewing over there that can be about military mobilization. And then two, he also said that this is going to be in conjunction. So transit Mars and Uranus will be conjunct where Pakistan and India have their Saturn and their Pluto in these degrees conjunct. Okay, so Saturn, Pluto, limitation of power, something revolving around controlled power. Mars, Uranus comes in, and it kind of like blows that up. So I'm wondering, is there major trade decisions coming? Is there going to be much more on some kind of like global incentive for making changes in regards to energy? Are we moving away from one energy source? Are we moving towards nuclear? Is there going to be some kind of new renewable energy that's going to be coming in that's going to be positive? I'm trying to see the positive in this. Are we going to see more environmental extremism and or a move to cut or outlaw cash? Well, certainly India's experienced some of that. We have seen some of this happening in a lot of different places. I think that the last couple of years has been interesting. Everything from seeing the Canadian truckers and them making the decision to protest and having them, strike their bank accounts, to seeing, people waking up this last year in Cuba, not being able to get cash out and being told that basically they're going to be moving to a new system. It's no real secret that there is some move by the central banks to be able to kind of move towards a digital system. And I think they realize that fiat is dying and that it's a system that's broken. And so there's really no other option. You were either going to continue to kind of see taxes go up to try to pay for it to fix it, or we're going to see that the system's going to break down, it's going to crash, or both. And so when I think about this, I'm like, yeah, I think it is going to be a move to justify outlawing cash. Is it going to be because of issues like what we saw with the pandemic? I mean, the pandemic was crazy. Several years of people not even wanting to touch their groceries, let alone cash. We saw that there was sports centers and concert venues that were doing basically like cash exchange, where you put cash into a machine and it spits out a debit card and you can use the debit card for places that won't use cash. Scary stuff. But then I hear things that are happening in the world and I'm like, okay, there is some safety and security. We do see that people are, encouraging people to shop with cash certain days, small business Fridays, whatever. You go out, you once a week you spend, your shopping or whatever on cash. I read an article yesterday that was talking about how there was a grocery store in the UK that went completely digital. And about 50 people decided all at the same time to go to the grocery store and fill up their baskets and do all of their shopping. And then when they got to the checkout line to check out, they were like, no, we're cash only. And everybody abandoned their basket and they left. They called the manager. The manager had a conversation with the owner. They ended up having a meeting and they decided that they were going to get rid of the no cash policy. So something I'll tell you guys is that the Mars-Uranus stuff only works if you're willing to play the game, all right? So yes, there can be some tension revolving around, food, money, resources. But ultimately, I think that this is going to be a wake-up call. Look at what happened in the summer of 2022 for more information, just to kind of get a gauge of what was kind of going on then. I believe that's when like some of the FTX stuff was happening. We were also seeing all the crazy stuff going on with like AMC and the GameStop stuff. That whole summer with the squares from Uranus was pretty wild. Anyway, all right. So then one other thing that I wanted to bring up is that we're going to see, and this kind of has to do with the United States, but the United States, obviously the New York Stock Exchange, right? So this is the New York Stock Exchange chart. Leo rising, Sun in Taurus, Moon in Aries. There's been so much action all over this chart. We've had eclipses on the moon. We have seen that Pluto just recently started coming into square with Venus. We've had Uranus dancing on the Mercury. And maybe that's why we've seen so many tech stocks go completely crazy. People mention AI and a stock goes up like, 100%. And now we are getting ready to see Uranus come into conjunction with the sun, which is going to be completely going haywire in terms of everything we knew about the identity of the stock market. And it's ruled by the sun. So it just so happens that the day that we're having the Mars-Uranus conjunction, well, it's going to be pretty much right on top of the sun. So in my mind, I'm like all eyes on the New York Stock Exchange. Transits to the sun are some of the most important transits. And we're going to see that we're going to have that Mars-Uranus conjunction. Uranus is going to move then shortly after to 27 degrees. We're also seeing the sun come into an opposition with Pluto. I think this is spelling major change, for the stock market. I've said several times, we are moving into a direction where I think there's going to be tokenization of all assets. you have a mortgage, you have a car, you have, specific assets, and there's a token for everything, and it will be kept in like a digital file essentially. How does that impact the stock market if people are claiming that they own or possess certain stocks or bonds or resources or things that they're invested in? How does that work? How do we integrate all of that into what's a new system? How does developing technology impact trading? It's like people who are really into the stock market. These are people who just like they wake up, they're watching it, they're watching their tickers and everything kind of moving and what's trading. And it can almost be like obsessive. And I think a lot of that is really baked into, the the Sun-Mercury conjunction, where this is technically under the beam. So the mind is possessed, right, with money, Taurus. And it's right on top of star Algol in a square to Pluto. We've certainly heard that there have been times where the stock market crashes and people are throwing themselves off of bridges, right? Or they're, in extreme desperation or fits of rage or greed. It's almost all consuming. It's baked into the chart. Pluto square Mercury, mind obsessed, fixated with money, will do anything for money and greed. The corruption aspect of Pluto, and then you factor that in with the sun. So this makes this Mars-Uranus thing look a little bit more potent. We're going to see a Mercury retrograde that's also going to be going over the ascendant of the stock exchange. It'll actually start in the second house, and it'll go into the first house. So I do think that we're about to see a pretty significant whiplash in the market. I think we're going to see some really, really crazy things. And Uranus is still going to be in conjunction to the sun here for the better part of like the next year or so. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces, to the stock exchange. But I think this might have something to do with why all of a sudden there's some kind of change going on financially that could impact the United States. All right, so let me take you to number 2. What is the other thing that I see that's bringing up all kinds of fireworks for me? Well, number 2 would definitely be the full moon that's taking place in Capricorn. This is the second full moon that we're going to be having in this particular sign. So having a blue moon is the universe's way of being like, hey, like you thought you had, wrapped this up in this area of your life or whatever. Think again, we have to kind of readdress this and deal with this now. So that in itself is already saying like it's kind of a big deal. You guys have heard me talk about this full moon. I have not put out a video on it yet. Let's wait till we get to the new moon in Cancer. But for right now, what you need to know is that this is a blue moon, so it's double the work. Capricorn is double the responsibility, right? Capricorn is ruled by Saturn. This deals with top-down structures like government, leaders, managers, bosses, big business, big government, right? And this full moon is going to be conjunct Pluto. My goodness, guys. This is where the big guys get exposed. This is what's going to happen. This is the third decan of Capricorn. This is like the oldest, meanest, most crotchety, old, power-hungry people at the top are getting exposed. That is what's happening right now. It is not over, but this is going to be peak time of exposure. And Pluto is still yet to go retrograde back into Capricorn. So that's going to happen later at the end of the summer going into the fall, and it'll be there for about a month or two. So that's where we're going to continue to kind of move through what can feel like a crisis when it comes to leadership and power. I think that I would just say get your popcorn ready, because the treason, the corruption, the crimes, the abuse of power are about to be on full display. And this is not limited to the United States, by the way, okay? This is all over. We're seeing snap elections going on right now in France. We're about to see them in the UK. We are seeing major tide turning in regards to the types of people who are being brought into government, who are being elected. I'm expecting sudden panic, backdoor meetings, secret alliances going down. You guys remember the 29 degrees of Capricorn? I told you it's about having backdoor meetings and people discussing things, hidden away, right? So there's no coincidence that we're seeing these elections, and it may end up being some really interesting times for bringing in some completely different change or transformation in government. But Pluto at 29 degrees is the death rattle, right? It's like that last breath that comes out that just, does everything that it can to kind of maintain its position. Will we see change in government or leadership? Time will tell. Saturn is the ruler of this particular full moon, and Saturn is retrograde right now in the sign of Pisces. So it is kind of saying like we are now reevaluating whether or not we have been misled or, told the truth. If there is lack of transparency, if there's lack of leadership, lack of direction, right? I keep saying Saturn retrograde, Neptune retrograde is like who's steering the ship? Where are we going, right? And so in the whole sign fourth house, it can be, well, who's leading the nation? And certainly Pisces can be about memory, especially when you have like Saturn and Neptune involved. It can be about dementia and old age and things revolving around that. So that can be a concern that people have. And Saturn will be retrograde. So it basically means that this is the moment. And I kept telling you guys, when Saturn goes retrograde, that's when everybody's going to realize, oh my God, this thing is not as stable as we thought it was in your life, wherever Saturn is. But also when it comes to like leadership and when it comes to boundaries and when it comes to borders and when it comes to walls and immigration issues and water issues and bridges, you guys are going to see it all start to kind of leak right now. So this is the Emperor has no clothes moment, right? And what I expect from this, because it's a full moon conjunct Pluto in Capricorn, is intense emotions. Because the full moon represents a peak lunar cycle and it's bringing emotions to the head. And with Pluto being involved, it's about transformation of power and it adds intensity to the depths of these feelings. So obviously with the ruler being in the fourth house, this is it coming out. We're talking about it. And like, I told you guys too, the late degrees of Pisces is panic. People panic. It feels like we're drowning, And so in the third house, this is why you're seeing people freaking out and suddenly changing their perspective and their tone and the way that they're acting and, kind of responding to what's going on with leadership on TV. It's about media, third house. But the full moon's going to be in the second house of money, personal possessions, spending power. And it just so happens to be in conjunction to the United States Pluto. While we're finished with our Pluto return, we're still feeling the effects of it until next year, until Pluto has moved into Aquarius. And when that happens, the next couple of years, we get to dance with Pluto conjunct the South Node. So any well-seasoned astrologer will look at this chart and say to you, like, the United States definitely has a lot that it still needs to go through the next couple of years between Pluto on the South Node, where we may completely restructure everything revolving around money. It may become digitally backed, maybe, I don't know. We do see that the South Node trines Uranus on the descendant, so there may be something else that comes in that could provide a solution. That could be digital, but it could also cause a complete, existential crisis, and people will fight it, rightfully so. We also see the United States is coming into the Uranus return, okay? We are going to be having Saturn and Neptune come into conjunction with our IC in this next year, and that's going to be a complete, I think, restructuring of the country. We're going to have to. That's rebuilding and reimagining the foundations of the home. This is in the whole sign fifth house, so it's also going to be about younger people and younger people getting more involved and looking more, I think, at like birth rates and what's going on with our youth and whether or not, people are actually feeling optimistic about the future, having children, having businesses, whether or not they feel healthy and capable of being able to thrive in their country. But I'm expecting full moon here. There's going to be some stuff that's going to go down with that conjunction to Pluto, and it's going to involve money. There's going to be some kind of money crisis. There can be something exposed about where money's been going, where leaders have been sending money, what we've been doing with it. And likely that's going to be making some very big headlines. So it can be stuff revolving around taxes. It can also be things revolving around, our expenses as a nation. I do expect it to be a time of transformation and rebirth. Pluto's the cosmic janitor. He's here to kind of sweep up everything and kind of get it out and eliminate what isn't serving us. So this full moon can be a deep moment of like rebirth, realization, and like shedding old patterns where we can really kind of finally see the rot that's been going on. And I think that with Saturn retrograde in the third, I think people are going to be reflecting on and being like, should we be encouraging these never-ending wars? Where is the money going? What are our taxes paying for? How is it benefiting education? How is it benefiting our communities? And I think that people are going to have a lot to say about just their relationship to taxes and whether or not it's actually, benefiting us. Certainly, there's been a lot of talk about tax reform. We've got some candidates coming forward saying that they want to completely get rid of not sales tax, but the tax that you get, income tax, and talking about replacing it with tariffs, right? Trump's talking about doing that and saying, well, if we put tariffs on goods and stuff that are basically going in and out of the country, then, we can kind of counterbalance that, and we're taking that stress off of Americans. Crazy idea, right? We've had income tax, I think, since like the 30s, and we have definitely seen that since then, and also since the creation of the Fed, there has been a devaluation of our money. There's a longer story to that. A lot of that's going off the gold standard. A lot of that is also, I think, where we have seen that the United States has really kind of gotten involved with trying to make the dollar the U.S. reserve currency. And that obviously is going to speak a lot out in the world in terms of a relationship with other countries and kind of being the biggest on the playground. But also when we are funding these wars and getting involved with wars, it has major economic, damage to other people. And so we've seen recently kind of the rise of the BRIC nations. And we're seeing these BRICS nations kind of coming together, talking about trying to create like a gold-backed currency that would rival that of the US dollar. And now we're starting to see certain countries that are no longer using the petrodollar as they exchange. So they're not paying with the US dollar. They're not doing any exchanges with our money. So sooner or later, we're going to see that's going to have a huge impact on us. We're going to probably start realizing, oh my God, like we thought prices were high now, they're going to get even higher. And I think the unraveling of the current financial situation in the United States is just going to become so much more obvious with this full moon. So expect exposure of hidden truths, because Pluto is about secrets, power, and control. And with Pluto conjunct this moon, he's basically saying that it can bring the hidden truths to light. And this could be about exposing corruption, abusive power, and hidden agendas. There's karmic lessons here because Capricorn is associated with Saturn. Saturn's about karma. 29 degrees is a critical aneretic degree. So this brings about karmic lessons, and there's a sense of urgency, and it feels like now or never. So with Pluto at this degree, we're exposing hidden truths that may be particularly significant or impactful. So we're going to have to be asking these hard, difficult questions, basically during the time of this full moon. And there's going to be a need to have transparency and disclosure. Watch for themes revolving around authority, structure, and responsibility. I think Pluto coming through there is like a wrecking ball. And he's basically saying we need to transform or expose the aspects of these themes, like corruption within institutions or abuse of power by those in positions of authority, and show exactly how much money they're making. Why is it that they're getting paid what they're getting paid as a modest salary from the U.S. government, because they're civil servants, but maybe they're making tens of millions of dollars in stock trades with insider information, where they are working hand in hand and kind of getting their pockets lined by lobbyists, and they're getting paid to basically influence legislation that may not be the best for the American people. And this is happening on both sides of the aisle, right? Essentially, America right now, from my perspective, is like a suit. It's been sold out. So now we're having to kind of come to terms with the fact that now law and business and our country has been so intertwined that essentially the country is functioning almost more like, more like a corporate entity, like a company. I think we've done a lot of damage, both in terms of law, but also in terms of really losing our way when it comes to seeing the true values of the American dream, the American life. And we're seeing Americans that are really struggling financially as a result of that. Watch for the collective impact, because a full moon does have a collective impact. So what's happening here, especially as an American, can be like a watershed moment where all of a sudden, you're seeing some significant event taking place and it has a major impact on society, leading to shifts in power dynamics, and also things that can really make you go, you know what, I want to change too. Or I'm sick of this as well, or I'm not putting up with this either. And it's definitely like a breakthrough moment, and possibly preparation for down the road when we see, we're going to have a full moon that's going to be later this year that will be in opposition to Pluto. We're going to see a Mars retrograde that's going to go in opposition to Pluto through Cancer. So there's definitely going to be a lot of more Pluto things that we're working with. And for the United States, it's very much about money spent, what we have, what we possess, what the U.S. government is actually getting from taxes and all kinds of other stuff, and then how that money is being delegated, how it's being spent, and whether or not it's being utilized appropriately and the kind of debt that we are in because of how long it's been mismanaged. All right, so that's going to be fireworks for sure, 100%. And then let's go and look at my number 3. Okay, so my number 3 is the solar return for the United States. And so all 3 of these things are going to be happening here in the month of July. So this is my final one. I want to give you guys my kind of crash course really quickly, run through the solar return, give you some of my thoughts on some of the aspects because there's definitely a lot going on in this chart. Essentially, the solar return is the birthday chart for America. So the United States is going to be having their birthday on the 4th of July. Sometimes it's a little early, sometimes it's the next day. And this looks like it's going to be right around 4:07 p.m. in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, because that was the birthplace of the United States. So this chart is a Scorpio rising. I assess this very similarly as I would like a natal chart. This is just going to give me kind of like a vibe for the year. I look at the ruling planets, I look at the aspects, I look at what's retrograde, I look at what might get kind of like triggered with eclipses and retrogrades and other things as well. So the first thing I look at is the ascendant sign. So the United States is traditionally a Sagittarius rising. So this is a Scorpio rising. So it's kind of taking the United States 12th house and putting it on the ascendant. So it's dealing with shadow issues. It's dealing with hidden secrets. It's dealing with things that can be self-undoing. Scorpio obviously is a very intense sign. It's ruled by Pluto and Mars. And Scorpio rising in a solar return year is a year of reevaluation. Okay, this is a year of change. It can be about purification. It can be about rebirth. When you see a solar return with this ascendant sign, it means that you're going to go through a real significant change, even in how you look and how you present yourself or how you feel. Yeah, you want to look at the degree and then you want to look at the ruling planets. So this is 17 degrees of Scorpio. 17 degrees deals obviously with Leo. So this is about leadership. Okay, so there may be a change of leadership. That's already kind of baked into the United States. That was one of the reasons why I said that I did not think that Joe Biden was going to end up being president in this next year. There was many, but I think this was one of them. This also means that there's going to be a change for younger people. There's going to be a change also when it comes to the heart of America. This is ruled by Pluto and Mars, but Mars is the traditional ruler of Scorpio, so I look at Mars first. And Mars is sitting at 18 degrees in Taurus in the 7th house. Okay. So what does this mean? Okay, so we talked a little bit about the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It's close enough that it is feeling it, right? It's about like what, 7 degrees away from conjunction. So 10 degrees is enough to feel the conjunction. This basically means that we're putting the chart ruler in the 7th house, and Mars is a malefic, even if it is a Scorpio rising. So it means that there's going to be combativeness, there's going to be dealing with issues or conflicts head on. This is about debates. This is about potential war. It means that there could be a change of allies. We may be fighting over land, fighting over food, fighting over resources, Taurus things. Then we look at some of the other aspects Mars is making. It sextiles Venus, which means, okay, we hash out our problems and it helps us make major changes in potentially our relationships to other people, in our relationships to our resources. And Venus is on the cusp of the 9th house. So it can be our relationships to foreign lands, for better or for worse. We also see that Mars is in a sextile to Saturn. So Saturn in the 4th house is retrograde. It's reevaluating what's best for me. How am I feeling? Saturn retrograde and Neptune in the 4th house to me feels very like people are losing momentum. They're losing speed. They're not feeling as optimistic or positive about the future. There is emotional or psychological issues. There's worry, housing issues, issues pertaining to security and home. So it might mean that some of these issues are what's prompting some of this conflict head on with other people. Now, Venus is the ruler of these two planets. And Venus is very close to the sun, and we'll kind of get into that in a second, but basically there can be much more of an emphasis, I think, with the sun and Venus in the 8th house this year in making massive changes and transformations in regards to our financial system and also our values. We look at Pluto. Pluto is the modern day ruler of Scorpio. In this chart, it's in the 3rd house and it's retrograde. And if you notice that Pluto is in opposition to Mercury. Now, this is going to be a really important thing to look at because later in the year, when we get into December, Mars will go retrograde in Leo, and it'll go retrograde around 6 degrees. That'll be very close to the United States North Node. That will also be right in conjunction to this Mercury. So that means that off the bat, I'm like, oh, Mars retrograde, you know, the ruler of this chart over the Mercury, which is going to be about money. It's going to be about speech. It's going to be about communications. It's going to be about data. It's going to be about information, is going to be a hot topic, right, pertaining to law in the courts. Now, Mercury in the third house, and it's in opposition, Pluto in the third house in opposition to Mercury in the ninth house. Big changes in communication, education, travel, and the courts. Intense topics all year long. You can expect that all the way into summer of 2025. I anticipate this could bring up issues relating to security matters and changes revolving around IDs, passports, and maybe even freedom of speech matters. We talked a little bit about on Tuesday how Mercury opposed Pluto is about feeling like intellectually threatened or, communication, being threatening or kind of bullying. So there can definitely be this sense of needing to rethink or rework communication, speech, platforms, and information. And so there can be this resistance to wanting to speak the truth, tell the truth about relationships with foreign countries, not wanting to release decisions that are being made by courts, feeling kind of threatened by that in some capacity, right? Interesting. So Pluto in the third house means that all year we're transforming communication, learning, and local environment. And so I think the United States is going to go through a radical shift in our thought process and also our communication style. And I think we're reaching a point where we're realizing, like, when it comes to education, early education, there's definitely some problems here, right? Reading levels, writing levels. We've had kids that were missing school during COVID. This is obviously ruled by Uranus, and you've got Mars conjunct Uranus. So people are going to be angry. People are going to be agitated about what's being taught in school and changes that are happening to education standards in school, specifically kindergarten and kind of and elementary school is more third house. Ninth house is going to be more about law, and it's going to be about higher education, and it's going to be also about professors and college. So I think that we're going to see lots of difficult conversations revolving around what we are teaching children of all ages, really, and what they are learning and what they are absorbing about their beliefs and some of the really difficult topics, like conflict that can be happening in other countries. But the question is why is that being brought into college campuses? Why are we doing that? Conversations revolving around sex and identity and gender, because that is Pluto, and Mercury is young children. And we may see some groundbreaking legal decisions and lawsuits revolving around freedom of speech, freedom of education, but also like where some things may be crossing the line. And so I think that's going to be like some major topics with that opposition for sure. We've got Saturn retrograde in Pisces in the fourth house, indicates a time of introspection and restructuring relating to home, family, and emotional foundations. I think as Americans, this is going to have us reevaluating our sense of security and our emotional boundaries, point blank. Dealing with, water that may not be healthy or safe, dealing with drug epidemics, dealing with issues pertaining to bridges and barges and levees and, anything that holds or contains water, basically. We might see some real issues with like flooding and stuff like that as well. Also boundaries. I mean, you talk about like Saturn in the fourth house. It's like, do people start wanting to put cameras outside of their home because packages are getting stolen? Or are people, feeling the effects of homelessness increasing and not feeling safe or secure in their space? Are they seeing more crime and like drug issues within their neighborhoods? Are they experiencing problems if they're living closer to places where there's lack of border security? I mean, these are things that you do see. I have Saturn and Neptune daily in my fourth house. And so when I see Sag risings, or late Scorpio risings that are kind of going through this transit, I'm always quick to remind them that you will become more aware of these things than usual. So this may mean that finally we're starting to address some of these topics. And maybe perhaps Saturn in conjunction there is about kind of really reflecting on that, just because we are being compassionate and, I think a lot of democratic perspectives and wanting to help other people and being compassionate and empathizing with what people are dealing with in other countries. Originally, the idea was to open the United States and be able to give them asylum, which I understand. But I think the Saturn-Neptune is also saying that in doing so, what we're not seeing is disease, crime, further issues pertaining to safety and security, and also like a dissolving of like national identity, right? And that's there's nothing wrong with saying that. I feel bad that I even have to say that on the internet, but that's the truth. There are people who live here that take great pride in being Americans, but they're kind of starting to lose that America that they once knew when they were younger. So when I think of Saturn and Neptune, that can also be sad, kind of reflecting on being like, man, I just don't remember things kind of being like this. Because maybe we're seeing homelessness or towns that are becoming deserted, or maybe we are seeing, like a complete shift in some of the demographics in certain areas, right? All right, so then we've got the North Node in the 5th house. This is going to basically be really focusing on, in my opinion, personal growth, entrepreneurs, creatives, younger people taking risks, people following their passions, being more individual. I think that with Mars being the ruler, you're going to see a lot more people who are going to basically be like, I'm doing my own thing. I'm not going to argue with you about politics. I'm not going to argue with you about money or what I should be doing for a living. I'm just going to go my own way. Neptune also, I want to say on Neptune being in the 4th house is, I think also it's going to emphasize the theme of home and family and potential confusion or disillusionment in this area. And that can kind of play on some of the immigration stuff. But it's also about letting go of old patterns. That's something else I wanted to say. Letting go of old patterns. Where we can have a tendency to react to things too emotionally, right? Because that can definitely be a theme this year. North Node in the 5th house, we talked about that. Chiron in the 5th house as well. Just barely, but it is there. And so I think that for the United States, this is going to be a year of healing and self-discovery, and really focusing on getting our confidence back. Like I can say, like as an American, I kind of feel like watching other countries and the comments that people make about our leadership, it's hard because there's a lot of truth to what some people are saying. It's hard to talk to foreigners, because I talk to a lot of foreigners, people all over the world who are like, yeah, like, what are you going to do? Like if this person doesn't win, like that's going to affect everything for the rest of the world and how everybody's watching you. So I kind of feel like, I don't think it's just me. I think a lot of people are just kind of like, man, like, is America going to get it together? Like, are they going to get their groove back? So it may be about really addressing wounds or insecurities as a country and finding new ways to heal, some of those issues. And obviously it's very much connected, the North Node and Chiron, to Mars. So it's about kind of dealing with those problems head on and finally kind of healing them. Obviously, Mars in the 7th house, the year of action and determination in relationships, and a need to be more assertive. I don't think America has a problem with that. But it can also be about setting boundaries and taking initiative in relationships. Now, that factored in with the conjunction to Uranus might be a little too aggressive. You poke the bear, right? And then it ends up being a situation where that has some unpredictable kind of effect with relationships, sudden shifts and unexpected developments in partnerships, especially pertaining to food and resources. Now, I want to read you guys something. You guys know I'm always talking about Nicola, and he has a lot to say about 18 degrees. You guys have heard that as kind of like the diabolical degree. Supposedly, this is like it's a Virgo degree, but 18 specifically, it's got some issues. Okay. So basically, he goes through all of the different 18 degrees that he sees in the different signs. And so you have to take into consideration, Taurus, food, money, resources, values, whatever, land, the earth. And then Mars can be about conflict, combat, war. And 18 degrees can deal with health. It can deal with a number of things. So I was like, well, what did he have to say about 18 degrees? And what's interesting, let's see, where did he, okay. So his example that he had for President Harry Truman. Okay, so he was born on May 8th, 84. And he was the president who authorized the dropping of the bomb. Okay, he has Sun, which is about decisions, at 18 degrees of Taurus. Where's Mars? 18 degrees of Taurus. Interesting. Okay, what about this? What else did he have? This one. Was this one? Which one was it? 18 degrees. Okay, so he also noted that when the atomic bomb was dropped on August 6, 1945, the ascendant of the event was 18 degrees of Virgo, while the moon and Saturn were at 18 degrees of Cancer. Robert Oppenheimer was born on April 22nd. He was the one who made the bomb, had the ascendant of 18 degrees Scorpio. And he also had his cusp of his 8th house of death, 18 degrees of Gemini. Okay? Damn, that's close. It's not exact, but it's close. So that Mars in the 7th house could quite literally be something that could be explosive, an explosive change in relationships, explosive change with allies, an explosive situation that leads to war. The ruler is Venus. Venus is conjunct the sun. Okay, technically it's still kind of combust. It's close enough. So what does it mean that, they could be so focused and consumed with money, resources, changes with the housing market? It's hard to say, but there is something very explosive that should be coming this year with some of that kind of getting activated. Yeah, but it's crazy that all those 18 degrees came up. All right, so Jupiter's in the 7th house. The positive is that this is a year of growth, and it can be about expansions in relationships. So like having conflict and distancing ourselves from some people, could that be isolating with the sun and other planets in the 8th house? Yeah, but Jupiter in the 7th house is just kind of like what we learn through that isolation and separation, and like who we kind of cut off, and that it opens the door for new allies. Although Mercury is the ruler and Mercury is in opposition to Pluto. See, I really see this as some countries coming forward and being like, we want peace. We don't want to continue this. I mean, we've heard this from Putin. I'm not defending him, but we have heard him say that. And we've also heard him say recently that he is also calling for peace in Ukraine. But I think that there's more to the story here that, perhaps maybe this is indicating that there is an incentive to try to kind of work with allies and diffuse situations. But doing so would have to uncover truths and things that are hidden about where money has gone, what things have been put where, what took place, what the incentive was to kind of initiate war in certain places or proxy wars. Because that's basically what this has been. Now, we've had our current president say there will not be boots on the ground, that they will not send United States military or weapons, into Ukraine. And now we're having stuff that is being launched from Ukraine into Russia. And Russia, we're kind of dancing with potential, nuclear warfare now. So, I feel like a lot of this would be kind of tricky, because I think that there are some people in this country that are so diehard to maintain control and also maintain that sense of secrecy and not let people really know, general public, what's going on and what's being done and where the money's going, that they will push us to some unnecessary limits where we're potentially faced with some really dire situations in terms of potential nuclear war or attacks. We've got Moon in the 8th house in Cancer, which is like super moody. The Sun is in the 8th house in Cancer. The Moon is in the 8th house in Gemini. The Sun's in Cancer, Moon is in Gemini. They're coming into what's going to be a new moon phase. So this is a dark moon this year. So it feels like everything's kind of getting cleared out, which works with the theme of Scorpio rising and then all that 8th house stuff. But deep emotional processing with the moon in the 8th house, a need to talk about and confront our fears and release old patterns. And that moon is in a square to Neptune. So this can also mean that there is this feeling of like crisis revolving around getting clarity about which end is up, what's going on, how do we feel about the future. We may be kind of misled about some kind of relationship with a foreign country. because the moon represents foreign leaders, and the square to Neptune is like being told like, no, like this country's bad, you know, like they don't want to help us, or like they are the enemy. So there could be a lot more than usual. I would say like, you know, stuff being pumped into the media that's just essentially like more fear porn and propaganda at its finest, trying to kind of spin stories and other things so that way we're not really aware of what's happening, which I would say anyway with the Mercury in opposition to Pluto, to be honest with you. And it's kind of cool now that I have so many international like clients and people, and I can like talk to them and ask them about like news and stuff, and like can guarantee you there are things happening out in the world that Americans have no idea. There's like definitely like media blackouts and stuff. We don't hear about certain stuff depending on where you get your media from. And you know, how we're being told things are, you know, from our kind of immediate level with the media, versus how things are actually being portrayed, you know, in the rest of the world. So I think a lot of this can be, do we get stuck in our own echo chamber where we're just hearing what, you know, what we think or what we're told and we believe, and we're not really aware of what's kind of going on out in the world, and where does that alienate us and keep us from being able to kind of resonate with other people? And then we have Venus in Cancer and the Sun in Cancer in the 8th house. And so this is 8th house energies, further emphasizing the themes of emotional transformation, depth in relationships, experiencing deep connections, and the need to emotionally heal and confront our patterns, right? You know, I think all this like Cancer in the 8th house is like, you know, acting like the victim and everybody's out to get us. And I think that's what's so interesting about the United States chart, is that it has like that Sag rising with, you know, Mars and Gemini, and then it's got like all this like Cancer in the 8th house, you know? So it like kind of shows up and it talks a big fight, but then in reality, it's like, it actually isn't as scary or as, you know, strong as it appears. And, you know, maybe you see that from the outside, but on the inside, there can definitely be a lot of that overconfidence being projected because of insecurity, and feeling like lack of and not having enough control. And then you look at like the Venus and the Mercury and the Pluto opposition, and really it comes down to control over money. So it's sad, but you know, I think that this is the year where the chickens come home to roost. I think with this dark moon, Sun, Moon, Venus in the 8th house, the Scorpio rising, the Pluto themes in this chart are very strong, very strong. And it's about really America needing to get real and confronting our fears and finally undergoing a period of intense, deep transformation that really has to happen from the ground up. Mercury's in the 9th house, so this is good for communication. It's good for learning and higher education in theories and travel. Definitely, like I said, a lot of news revolving around the courts and things that are being decided upon and kind of put out there, but it is going to definitely be difficult to wrap our mind around, and it's going to be a lot of things that people aren't going to agree about because of the opposition to Pluto. That midheaven is in Leo. It's at 27 degrees. It is conjunct Donald Trump's ascendant. So definitely, I think that ascendant being connected to that, and also we've got a number of, you know, Joseph Biden's planets that are on the ascendant. It's interesting because I do feel like it is kind of talking about like there is going to be a shift in power, and that it's probably going to be about moving away from hidden Scorpio type of vibes and moving in the direction of something that is bold leadership. Somebody who is going to want to be seen, you know, as somebody who is a leader and somebody who is strong and somebody who has a lot of vitality, regardless of who that is. That's kind of like what this chart is kind of indicating. And so that we might be really focusing on, you know, working on America's public image, focusing on stronger leadership roles, public recognition, and being able to provide maybe or bring more life when it comes to U.S. or American jobs. So I do think this is going to be a year of deep emotional processing. I do feel like this is about transformation, growth, and self-discovery. I am curious to see, you know, how this is going to play out for the next year, because I know that things are going to get particularly colorful. Even just comparing, you know, the United States chart, because sometimes I do this with solar returns. I like to put the natal chart on the outside and see what's going on. There's a ton of stuff going on here. You know, we've got the moon conjunct the IC, so this is going to be a much more kind of quiet, kind of reflective year, really Cancerian. We've got natal Uranus conjunct Jupiter, so it's going to radically change and transform something about our relationships with other countries, obviously. Mars is getting pretty close to the moon, so that can also feel a little emotionally turbulent and that we're kind of under the gun and there's some kind of pressure. And the North Node in conjunction to our Mercury. And so we talked about how Mars will go retrograde back and forth over that. I think it's going to be a lot connecting to the courts. I speculate it is possible that it can be about the court somehow being involved in making a determination for the results of the US election. We're going to be having the election on the 5th of November, and then the inauguration's on the 20th of January. So that's quite a period, right? I mean, literally the entire period, we're going to be seeing Mars turning retrograde, and it will oppose Pluto the entire time. So I don't anticipate that it's going to be a peaceful transition of power. I obviously pray for that. I hope so, but I really don't think that's going to be the case. I think we're going to see intense, increasing pressure, and I think a lot of divide, and potentially what can be bouts of just complete civil disarray. So we'll see what happens, but this is just giving you guys a little bit of a sample of some of the things that I discuss in my 2024 presidential video. If you guys want to see me break down those candidates, you want to see the dates that potentially we are going to see things changing with our current President Biden, and who I think may potentially be replacements, and if I think Trump's going to jail, and who I think is going to be president. I talk about all my different scenarios, and some of them include neither one of them. So it's definitely going to be a wild ride. This is going to be an election to remember. But let me know, leave me your comments, give me a thumbs up, and let me know what you think about this video or any other things that you noticed that maybe I didn't catch. For more information on my courses or on my presidential election video that I do, check out my website and the links below at www.beyondtheveiltarot.com. Thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate it. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I will be here tomorrow. We're going to be doing live readings. Catch me here. We're going to be doing new moon and Cancer readings. I'll post a link in the community tab if you want to join me, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Come hang out with me on Friday and we'll talk astrology. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your guys' day. Enjoy the 4th of July if this is your day off, and I will catch you guys all back here tomorrow. Take care.